Hi everyone, welcome. We will be waiting a couple of minutes for our participants. Yeah. I think we can start now. Welcome everyone to our Meet the Legal Startup Ecosystem with European Legaltech Association event. We are beyond excited to see you all legal tech enthusiasts in our event. First of all, I want to introduce myself and my team before introducing our amazing speakers. My name is Hilal, one of the directors of the Legal Tech program working for Kavlak Law Firm, which is based in Istanbul and London. For the last 10 years, I take role in impact-based organization and entrepreneurs networks as a community builder. My passion is to bring people together and build feature together in entrepreneurship organizations. Also, I want to introduce Amit. He is one of the directors and will be active in chat throughout the session and will be sharing the LinkedIn accounts of all our team. Please feel free to contact with us. We have 6 directors in our team: Amit, Fırat, Mesut, Andrea, and Andres. Andres is also one of the speakers and moderator of the session today. As you see, we have a global team based on different regions, has deep expertise in different various areas, and we're always glad to answer your questions. We have designed a great event lined up for you today. As we all know, to empower entrepreneurs, we need a powerful and sustainable ecosystem, which consists of entrepreneurs, investors, mentors, and community builders. So to look deeper in this legal tech ecosystem, hear inspirational success stories on their entrepreneurial journey, we have amazing speakers today. I will pass it off to our speakers to introduce themselves. First, Andres, the stage is yours. Can you please introduce yourself?
Well, thanks for that introduction, Hilal. I'm really happy to be here and share the opportunity and also some experiences we face in our lives regarding the interaction with legal tech and legal innovation in general terms. So yeah, my background, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law since so many years, so already almost 20 years. And then from traditional law firm positions into in-house positions, and then launching and founding my own company called Ulster Legal, basically the logo that you see behind my back. And basically Ulster is an alternative legal service provider. And then, well, I moved into legal tech too, and I founded another company related to it. So really happy to hear about the experiences that Edward and Holger have on the field, and also share probably some of those hacks and also pains that I suffered during my journey.
Thank you, Andres. Holger, it would be great to hear from you too.
Yeah, thank you. Hello to everyone, and then thank you, Hilal and Amit, for inviting me to share my experience together with Andres and Ed. Very happy to do that. My background is I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if I'm outside of the panel today, but I work in professional publishing for the last 25 plus years, mainly in the legal domain. So I work with or for lawyers, try to understand how they work, how they think, how they operate. And about 8 to 9 years ago, I went deeper into legal tech because I think that's the future of the legal profession. Because without technology, nobody can work in the 21st century. So I'm basically walking in 2 directions, training, educating lawyers about technology, what to use, how to use it, and why to use it, and building communities, different communities where lawyers and legal tech enthusiasts come together to share experiences and best practices. So that's my background.
Thank you very much, Holger. And Edward, can you hear from you your background a bit. Thank you.
Sure. Hi guys, I'm Ed. I work at a fund called SFC Capital. We're based in the UK, and we invest in early stage UK-based businesses. Emphasis on the early stage, so we like to invest, relatively early on into companies. Typically, one of the first investors in, and then we like to continue reinvesting in our portfolio companies through sort of follow-on funds that we have available to us. The amount of money we invest does vary, but anywhere from sort of about 100 to 300k as an average investment into each specific company. And we don't specialize in a sector, so we will invest in pretty much all sectors, including the legal tech space, in which we've done several investments. We don't specialize in a stage, so we'll invest all the way through from very early stage to revenue. I'm pretty active, so I tend to do close to 100 investments a year into new companies, and then about 30 to 40 follow-on investments into the portfolio.
Thank you very much, Edward. I'm so excited to learn from all of you. But before jumping to our conversation, I want to give a short info about FI and our program. So we'll give a quick presentation for you. Now let me share my screen. Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now that we're all well acquainted, I'm just going to give a quick overview on Founder Institute before our session. FI is the world's largest pre-seed accelerator that has helped over 6,000 founders launch venture-scale companies that have raised over 1.75 billion with a collective valuation of over 35 billion. FI has over 200 chapters across 100 countries, and a vast majority of those are geography-specific, based in many major cities. Our legal tech chapter is one of the handful of vertical-specific chapters, so it is a global program. And with fundraising generally, most venture-scale companies raise financing at certain intervals, starting with pre-seed, then seed, then Series A, B, and so forth, with a view to ultimately get to an exit event, which could be an acquisition by another company or an IPO. Our FI core program sits at the pre-seed stage, so it's designed to get you ready to launch your startup journey in a methodical way, including raising your first or second financing round. And how does it work? Step one is to find great people. So if you're looking to apply to our chapter, there's a link in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to myself, Amit, or another director if you have any questions. Once accepted, we provide you with a massive global network and structured training, followed by a lifetime of support throughout our ecosystem. We have the world's largest startup mentor network, over 25,000 mentors globally, but we'll also have legal tech specific mentors for our chapter. You can see our mentor list in our program's website as well. I believe there may be a few of them in the audience, by the way, so please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as well. Our core FI program is 4 months, and we meet on a weekly basis training starting in October. There are 2 tracks. One is the launch track if you're very early stage and just starting, or the second one, the growth track, if you already have a product and some early traction. Once you graduate, you'll have access to free additional structured programs that dive deeper, including Founder Lab that takes the training to a next level on the fundraising side and the product market side, and lastly, access to our exclusive FI venture network. And the segments of the overall FI ecosystem. And over here, we also have VC Lab, which is a structured accelerator program for VCs, which there's a massive group of global VCs in that network who all get access to FI graduates. So that's our quick overview, but you can always learn more or apply at the link in the chat. And now I'll hand it off to Andres and our speakers to share their inspirational journey with us. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. So, look, I mean, the idea of the session today is to share some stories, right, and to talk about them, and to interact with the audience regarding which are the learnings we got during this journey within the legal tech industry. And in my case, at least, the beginning of my journey in the legal tech industry was developed basically and mainly as a consequence of the consulting service I was providing on legal operations, actually. So I was helping legal departments worldwide in their transformation or digital transformation process. And as a consequence of that, I saw that there was an opportunity to start and build some kind of technologies and use those technologies to help those. Certainly, there were a lot of technologies available in the market at that time. And I'm talking about, I don't know, 4 years or 5 years ago when I started with developing my own technology. And I said to my partner and CTO at that time, look, we should find and discover if we can solve the problems we face with our consulting clients with tools that are available in the market. Because it doesn't make any sense if we go to develop or we develop anything if it's already solved. Right? So we started our research and we understood that in Latin America, at least, legal techs built for the need that we were seeing within those teams weren't available. So basically we said, okay, well, apparently there is a gap on those technologies available for that specific kind of need. So we should go into that. We started from scratch trying to integrate other kind of tools and building our MVP, and it was a mess. It was a mess because at the end, we couldn't really reach the delivery that it was expected. And we did build real Frankensteins in the back end. In the front end, you could find a beautiful dashboard or things like that. But we were trying at that time to solve one pain, which was the lack of information general counsels had to take better decisions or increase or improve their decision-making process. And what we saw is that matter management was the kind of title that englobed and covered that kind of requirement. So we said, okay, well, let's mix. I mean, let's use whatever, Trello or Monday or Asana or anything else, and let's integrate that with add-ins and plugins with any kind of other dashboard tools and things like that. And we went into that experience, and we ended up with so complex UX and UI softwares or solutions that adoption was really low. We said, okay, we have a problem apparently, because the solutions we are building are not going to be adopted and are not solving anything. Rather, they are generating troubles and increasing the time people spend in front of their screens. So we said, okay, well, let's try to build something different. And that's the beginning of the real journey. Because when we said, okay, let's see which is the real problem we want to solve, and also let's understand the way how we can reduce the frustration and also reduce the points of interaction with the user, because we have really, really busy users that usually have the pain of lack of time within their environments, and they are pressed to show results, but they always have the problem that, or say at least that they have the problem, that they are seen as a cost center, and so many other things that probably you and many other people have heard about lawyers, right? And complaining about the use of technology and complaining about their lives and complaining about the fact that they spend too much time doing things that they shouldn't, and so on and so forth. So we went into that journey, trying to build something different with a completely different approach, and that was the origin and the founding moment of Kia Technology. or legal support company. But still, it was a challenge to get adoption. When we had our MVP and going live, right, and we did our go-to-market strategy, we saw that adoption was still. And if we couldn't be able to figure out if first we were really getting a kind of product market fit, and secondly, we were able to provide real value and monetize that value to the customer, to the user, we were condemned to fail, basically, and basically put the curtains down and say goodbye. It was nice to meet you. And I believe that that's something that it's really part of our industry. It's a particular pain that we usually face, and certainly I believe that that's one of the reasons. It will be really pleasant to understand better how other people in the market see that. I mean, Ed has a particular vision regarding investment and taking decision investments within this kind of industries, and Holger has the experience and also the advantage of not being a lawyer, right? But interacting with lawyers and facing those kind of pains in real life. So I believe it's interesting to know that, and there's my first question, right, to Ed Weiss. How do you identify legal tech startups with the potential for long-term success, and what key criteria or attributes are most important when making investment decisions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, great. Yeah, I think going back to what I was saying earlier in terms of, we're not sector specific. So, we don't have one focus on legal tech or one focus on fintech. We invest in all the spaces. You might have some funds that, are very focused on legal tech and they have people on the team that, have a really good understanding of that market. We don't have a particular understanding of it specifically. What we do understand, though, just anecdotally, and I think it's pretty obvious, is that adoption of technology in the legal space is something that is becoming more and more ubiquitous and represents an enormous opportunity. So using that as a starting point at SFC, we think that the sector is really interesting, and we want to get as much exposure to it as possible. So as a starting point, when we get the way we would then analyze a specific opportunity is really basing the majority of our thinking on the team. Essentially, it sounds like a common answer, but we're early stage investors as well, so typically it's going to be relatively early on in the company's journey. You would obviously ideally like to see validation of the product, proof that there is a problem and proof that there is demand through sales, right? Ideally business will come to us with loads of customers and really good revenues, and if that is the case, then obviously it's a no-brainer. There's demand there, so that's great. And later stage funds, they might have that luxury to use that validation as a basis of the decision, but we're much earlier stage, so not a problem. It's just we base our decision making on the team specifically, and as I said, their background and their ability to be able to convince us that they know what they're talking about, essentially know what they're doing, and can execute. And I think obviously if it's a legal tech business, then I think we would like to see at least someone with some professional experience in the legal space, such as yourself. In your example, you worked in the space, identified a problem, and went for a solution. So if we've got that background story from a founder, then that's really positive sign to us, and would carry a lot of weight when discussing the opportunity. And then we need to see evidence that they can, as I said, execute, and ideally they would have some early evidence of a product or a prototype or an MVP, which they can demonstrate to us, and also have potentially demonstrated to potential customers at the very least. And obviously we'd like to see the response from those customers, and then ideally you'd move into sort of pilots and revenues, but we don't necessarily have to see that. But yeah, so go back to the team and their background and their ability to evidence that they understand the sector, and we basically rely on that for the validation, and then ideally.
Sorry to interrupt you, but before going to Holger, just one question to go deeper into an issue that I actually, in my own experience faced when I went to Rise Capital. I did say angel investor round at the beginning, and then I did a pre-seed investment round. That's the stage where we are with that legal tech specifically. And one of the things that we struggled with a lot actually was to determine basically the target achievable market, because everybody was saying to us, look, I mean, we need to understand how big the market is to understand the basically size you can be in the theater, and actually how that business model is going to generate the multiples that a venture capital fund needs, right? So how in your experience, how you approach that dilemma? Because the great problem usually legal tech companies have regarding TAM or SAM or whatever it is, sizing the market, is the lack of information, right? There is a lot of asymmetries, and it's really, really difficult, or at least it was for me, to build that scenario and to build that data. So which is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, yeah, as you said, it's very difficult to assess the addressable market in any sector, really. I think it's all a bit finger in the air stuff, if I'm being honest. And I'm not sure too many investors spend too long on it. If I'm being honest, more generally they look at it. And so I really, until investors specifically require you ask questions on it, I wouldn't spend a huge amount of time on it yourselves if you're raising money. We're a bit more qualitative than quantitative when it comes to market opportunities. We will obviously look into the sort of what markets are looking interesting and growing, and then basically say, well, we want to get some exposure to that. It's not really more technical than that. So legal tech would be a very broad sector, and there's lots of different verticals and subcategories of it. And if you're a specialist fund, then you might be more targeted. But we're very generalist. So we just look for legal tech companies in general. We obviously are relatively price sensitive when it comes to valuation, which obviously then determines your upside. So we're not investing at $100 million valuations, right, which would then need companies to exit for multiple billions for them to, as you said, achieve their target returns. We're much more towards the sort of lower end of the market, which means that an exit for us actually of maybe 5 to 10 million is a good outcome for us given the stage that we invest at. So I think there's always going to be enough space in markets to achieve those types of exits, if I'm being honest. But that's just our specific. We're very early stage and quite price sensitive. So that's sort of typically how we approach it. But every investor is different. And as I said, it's always good to have a slide in your deck on the TAM, SAM, TOM. But I think unless investors ask specifically any more questions on it, wouldn't spend too long on it. Like financial projections, again, of going a bit off topic, but they are just projections. And again, founders sometimes tend to spend too much time talking about that stuff when in reality it's much more important about talking about them and their experience, etc. That's really what's going to convince investors, I feel, much more so than the other stuff.
Wonderful, thanks. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I believe that the team, it's probably the main asset at that stage, right? So and Holger, just related with that, actually, you've been involved in European Legaltech Associations in a while. And also you have seen how the ecosystem grows and you promote that growth too, and you're part of this. So could you tell us about some kind of success cases or good stories that inspire the audience and are a good proof of the fact that legal tech is actually sexy and a good vertical to invest in and also develop new models and market?
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to just to put it in perspective, what I do, what we do. As I said, basically providing two avenues. One is information, coming back to your issue with accessible market size and so on. And I agree with that. Everybody's coming up with the most hilarious numbers. I just read about a new legal tech startup which quoted 87 trillion or 84 trillion US dollars totally addressable market. Great. what kind of investment they expect, I don't know.
Good to know. Good
But
to know.
yeah, it's really a hunt for the biggest number. But probably, as Ed said, they are not investors are not looking so much on that market, because everyone who has 5 chickens is looking for the global egg market. It's hilarious. So, and the second avenue is providing a stage for legal tech startups, a community. So with legal tech hackathons, conferences, webinars, and so on. So that's what we can provide. I can provide. So there's one success story I always like to tell. It's not so much because I have been involved or Elta has been involved, but it's one of those stories where you can say if they can make it, everybody can make it. So it's a startup called Oxdraft. They launched 2 brothers, one from the legal industry, one a software developer. If I remember correctly, in 2017, they started in Ukraine. And even Ukraine before the war was probably not the hotbed of legal technology. So they had their issues. The market was not very large, but they started because they basically have been fed up how lawyers work, how much time they spend to draft a document. So they designed a document drafting solution, and they haven't been the first in that market segment. They did invent drafting tools, but what they had was a clear vision of the product, of the market. They went to the US, became part of an accelerator. That's quite an interesting part of the story, because of course, if you do it as a 2-person startup, you can't achieve all those goals. So they went to the startup program, an accelerator program, grew and exited in 2020, if I remember correctly, sold their company to Onit. And now they launched another startup. So that's quite an interesting story, because if you can make it out of Kiev to the United States and sell to one of the largest players in legal tech, that's quite a success story. So if they can make it, everybody can make it. It's just an issue of persistence. And they entered the accelerator program at the 3rd try. So don't give up if you can make it the first time or the second time. Be persistent. Have a clear vision of your product. They got small investment after the acceleration program. So people will notice you, and that's quite an interesting story. And I've seen such stories quite a couple of times. And well, my perspective mostly Central Eastern Europe, but you can make it from everywhere.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that from your Japanese Toyo, right? So, and being Zen and being Japanese in execution, I believe it's quite interesting for legal tech startups. Many startups struggle with that too, and execution is a pain. You can have a great idea, but when you execute, probably the story changes. And I believe that there are 2 main words that I learned to really hate in my legal tech journey. The first one is traction. The second one is talent, right? And I hate those words, not because they are bad words, but rather because everybody was so insistent, and those words were repeated so many times in all my pitch sessions, that I became really afraid of those words. But I believe at the end of the way that certainly one of the things that make startup success is to have talent, and then one expression of that success is traction. Therefore, certainly those words apparently are quite relevant in a startup or a legal tech startup journey. So, in my experience, at least, and the kind of challenges we faced in the past were at the beginning of the road. Certainly, how to gather the proper talent and have the proper incentives to make the talent be happy and passionate about the problem we were solving. And as many of us have heard in the past, certainly entrepreneurs don't need to love or get in love with the solution, but rather with the problem, right? The solution may change, the problem is always there, and you need to be obsessed with the problem. So, and to be obsessed with the problem needs to have a team that has passion about that problem and really wants to get into a solution. Being that solution your first MVP, your third, or your 10th, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you finally get into a final solution and you were able to experiment and pivot during the journey, right? And traction becomes a consequence of it, right? Because traction at the end is reflection or a way to show that someone is really happy because you are able to help him or she to solve the problem that you saw or that you thought that it was a real relevant problem for many other people. So as many people or entities or companies or whatever it is are using your problem or using your solution, certainly it's a way to show that you have traction. And traction has become today, for us at least, one of the most relevant words. We solved the question or the challenge of building a great team. But today, the main challenge is to get traction. And traction in legal tech companies, it's not easy. I believe that probably, and Ed will confirm that in a few seconds, probably it's not easy in any industry. But certainly in legal tech, it's much more difficult because we face a kind of consumption attitude and a kind of audience that it's really, I would say, probably conservative, traditional, and don't really feel that technology is part of their lives when we talk about lawyers. When we are talking about a B2C solution where we are solving things like access to justice or things like paying fines in much proper ways and cheaper ways and things like that, well, we are having another conversation. My experience is in B2B maybe. But I'm wondering, and would really like to hear, Ed, what about legal tech and specifically legal tech is known for its unique regulatory challenges. Could you share maybe some insights into how your how an environment and how hurdles that are part of a regulatory environment may be evaluated or not in your investment decision? So I mean, if there are limitations in their ecosystem, because probably the kind of business you are deploying is regulated, how does that affect from an investment decision? Is that relevant in your decision-making process? And how relevant it is, and how it should be addressed by an entrepreneur or a founding team?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what I was saying in terms of not specializing, to be honest, we wouldn't focus too heavily on that side of it. We would, again, you know, obviously go off what the founder is telling us, and you know, we would assume that you know, if they're looking to operate in the market or the space they're looking to operate in, that they have a good understanding of that. You know, if they ultimately then end up having a complete failure and then not realizing the regulatory risk around it, then we haven't quite done our due diligence properly around the founding team. So you know, the more sort of you know, background information that we can get around the team and their professional experience, you know, the better. You know, we would always as part of our due diligence evaluation, always ask the key risks to the business, and you know, presumably if there was a regulatory risk there, they would flag that. We would ask for more information around it, but at some point we'd have to get comfortable that the founder understands the risk, but you know, doesn't necessarily see you know, see it becoming you know, a total deal breaker. So yeah, that's sort of typically how we approach it at SFC. But again, you know, different funds will have different approaches, but you know, we rely on the founder really to understand the regulatory environment around their business and you know, execute accordingly.
Wonderful, thanks for those insights. And Holger, how do you encourage collaboration and knowledge sharing among legal tech startups within your ecosystem, for example? And what benefits you believe or you observe fostering this sense of community, considering the kind of difficulties that legal tech has faced during the years to have a global reach and certainly a real impact against other kind of industries that might see much more like sexy, like fintech, insurtech, or others. Which is your sense and opinion?
Yeah, but there are probably objective obstacles in a couple of countries which we try to make aware of and to some extent maybe even influence that, like regulatory issues. There are countries where you can practice law without being a lawyer or admitted to some bar association and so on. Other countries are very restrictive, and that impacts the legal tech industry as well. So we try to address that as well. But in general, we want to provide a platform where legal tech startups can talk to each other, because I think 90% of the problems, issues for legal tech startups are the same everywhere. Doesn't matter if it's the UK with a large, or Germany or France with large legal service markets, or smaller countries. The problems are always the same. And of course, we try to push legal tech startups to communicate better, because if you understand that those problems are not unique to your legal tech startup, they are the same for everyone, and somebody already has experienced those issues, maybe has come up with a solution, and talk to them. The market is really big. There's no, I always understand there are issues of competition, and if I share that secret sauce with the competition, that might be not the best idea. What I want to assure everybody, the market is so big, and we have basically scratched only the surface of the legal tech market. So there's place for everyone, and if you communicate with somebody who has already solved a specific problem, that might be beneficial for everyone. So we try to foster it. We would like to have actually more legal tech startups in that community. So far, it's more the users of legal tech, and we always provide access to the users of legal tech, because that's always also an important factor. Legal tech startups should get feedback from the users, because in my experience, a lot of legal tech startups, especially those who are not involved, have not a founder from the legal industry with that background, they tend to ask lawyers what they need only after they came up with a product. So that's important to be in communication with your potential clients as well.
Thanks for that. And actually, that's interesting, because I mean, you always heard or read in like startup books and things like that usually you shouldn't specifically ask your client what they need. I mean, there is this classic like Henry Ford sentence that says, I mean, if you ask people if they wanted a car, probably they aren't going to say you that, but basically they're going to say that they want faster horses, right? So I believe that one of the things is to understand better, and that community can collaborate and contribute a lot to those kind of discussions, because it's a kind of sandbox where you can talk about a lot of things you're facing and how to basically overcome those challenges, right? And having that said, one thing that might be interesting at considering that your fund and your investment strategy is quite agnostic regarding like verticals, would be interesting, I believe, to the audience to understand better which kind of success stories that bring good lessons you would like to share about, or that could be like export and used as good insights and tips for legal tech entrepreneurs. Probably, I don't know, insurtech or biotech or other medical devices or health tech face similar challenges, right? Highly regulated markets with lacks of adoption and probably a lot of other challenges too. So in your experience from this broader array of different startups you face and you invest in. Which is your experience? Which lessons you would like to share with the others?
Well, coming back to your remark about asking the clients, every time you come up with that issue, you hear that quote from Henry Ford. But if you're going into ourselves, I don't know how small the percentage of legal tech startups or startup entrepreneurs at large are people like Henry Ford. So Henry Fords are one in a million probably. So we are not all Henry Fords, and we cannot think outside of the box like Henry Ford or Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. So it makes sense to talk to your potential clients and ask them what they want. They might not be right all the time, so that's always an issue to filter what they come back with all the feature requests. But basically, what I see, more startups in the legal tech space and beyond it suffer from not talking to the clients at all, or come up with some features or solving problems that are not perceived by the target audience as a problem. So I remember one that stuck with me. There's Charlie Uniman, who has the Legal Tech Startup podcast in the US, and he was 10 or 12 years ago. He has launched a startup to bring down the cost of transactions in the venture capital or the private equity industry. So he had a co-founder, and he was going to all those private equity funds and say, guys, you're looking, you have costs of I don't know, $500,000 per transaction. We can bring it down to 400,000 or 300,000. And finally, one of the guys said, guys, I like you, and I would like to tell you, we don't care. We might make multi-billion investments, and if the legal cost is 500,000, 400,000, or 1.5 million, it doesn't make a difference to us. We don't care. We spend probably more money implementing your technology than we can save with your technology. So don't harass us with your solution. It doesn't solve a problem. So we don't perceive it as a problem. So, but probably if they would have talked to that specific guy before coming up with a solution, would help them focus on the product, maybe make a pivot. So that's a lesson that could be learned.
Thanks. Ed, on your side?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point, Holger. I think about the pivot. Yes, I think it goes back again to the management and their ability to be flexible and recognize opportunities and risks and act accordingly, including not just incessantly focusing on one one path, but recognizing that it's not working and then pivoting the business. And there's been several of our investments that have started off doing one thing have pivoted multiple times, and indeed now doing very well. So don't by any means be afraid to pivot. Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. Always communicate it clearly, what you're pivoting to and why you're doing it to investors and to shareholders in general. But as long as you do that, there's if it's not working, then change it up. And I think just generally, what makes what if I'm looking at those companies on our portfolio that have done better than others, it goes back to the the management and the founders and their attitude. And while it's difficult to objectively say what it is, subjectively for me, and actually we've had these conversations internally with the team, it's the ability to be able to have the arrogance to know what you're doing and to get stuff done. Ultimately, but it's also the ability to have a humble side to you, which is willing to take on feedback, listen, and process it. Ultimately, you might not use it, but you at least do listen, and you do take that advice seriously. And those founders that can demonstrate those two characteristics, which in actual fact are contradictory characteristics almost, hence why there aren't many of these founders, they don't grow on trees, right, these superstars, because having those two characteristics is quite counter they're mutually exclusive almost. So but if you have that, those typically are the companies that I feel have done better than others, fundamentally. So yeah.
That's great. That's great.
So
okay,
okay,
go ahead.
Just one more story. If you're talking to potential clients, keep in mind that your potential clients might be even not lawyers, but other stakeholders in a company. Just one example. A legal tech startup in the IP management space. They went to the head of legal of a large corporation and asked them, don't you want to use that? They own the brand protection, IP management sector. Would you like to use our product? Because it helps you to speed it up, automate that process. And so, no. Your solution will get rid of all the human lawyers in our department. We can't allow that. So they went to the commercial director of that enterprise and they started it. And it turned out that they even had to hire more human lawyers to handle the workload, but their platform was handling 10 times more cases per year, and they were making money for the corporation, because it's not only about saving costs. There's a lot of focus in the legal tech space on saving time or saving costs, but saving time, saving costs, especially in the corporate environment, that's pennies. In a larger context of the corporation, it's 0.2 to 0.5% of revenues. That's the legal spend in a corporation, so that's pennies. But if you look at how much money they lose or how much money they have to spend on fines, look at the pharmaceutical industry, telecommunications, internet, and so the fines are huge. So if you can focus on those stakeholders who are in that part or are responsible for that part, then you have a totally different approach. So don't focus only on the lawyers in a corporation.
Yeah, that's a good tip too, I believe, because at the end, and that's something that, for example, in my experience, we face as a challenge, because our solution was meant at the beginning, at least, to solve lawyers' productivity in a certain way. So at the end, and we weren't thinking about law firms, we were thinking only legal departments. And when you see the size of legal departments, mainly in Latin America, you have an issue. And that's actually an issue of target achievable market or service achievable market, because at the end, there are really small groups of people within big corporations, and even that small group of people doesn't really manage a big budget or things like that, right? So at the end, the ticket and the acquisition cost and the and even the speed for getting the deal done and things like that really are difficult things to handle within legal tech when you address just those kind of users. But at the end, and that's a great example, Holger, because at the end, I was in Mexico last week, for example. I was invited to a conference and to share some experience on digital transformation with general counsels of the biggest Mexican corporations. And we were talking about this, about the kind of technologies that they had available, and also the kind of technologies they could access. And one of the best examples they gave was in a kind of a retail company where they said, look, I mean, we didn't see legal tech as a solution for us as a legal team, but rather we saw that a specific solution that was provided by a specific startup was really helpful to reduce all the litigation process with customers, for example. And the litigation process with customers doesn't really only reflect on legal fees to the lawyer that needs to handle that litigation, but rather it impacts directly on reputational risk and also on repurchase conducts or behaviors, and so many other things. So the value of reducing the exposure to potential litigation on customer issues was certainly much more higher than just per user, licensing agreement for a traditional SaaS software for a specific lawyer in that corporation, right? So I believe that those kind of approaches can change in heavily on the way how we see the impact or potential impact, and also the achievable market for legal tech. So I remember a mentoring session when I started a mentoring program with my startup at an acceleration program in Chile, which is one of the most well-known acceleration programs in Latin America, called Startup Chile. And basically that session and that mentoring session, which was actually first, was related and addressed by a serial entrepreneur that says, look, I mean, it's not only the problem, it's the size of the problem, right? And when you see the size of the problem, you need to understand that probably the size of the problem doesn't come directly from the problem you are solving, but rather of the, as you were mentioning, the stakeholders involved at the end of the way, right? And the coverage that that problem may have in many other like individuals or business units or even business relationships. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And well, we are coming to the end. Unfortunately, we have just spent the time we have for that. But two key questions for Ed and Holger. Ed, first, as an investor, and sorry, but we don't have more than 2 minutes for your answer, so keep on track. But as an investor, how do you see that a startup founder, and specifically in this case a legal tech founder, should better address to investors? I mean, how that legal tech founder should define the kind of investor that he needs to address in a specific stage of his development?
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
The question is, needs the pitch of a founder change if you are in a different stage and before different kind of investors? I don't know if that's more clear.
Yeah, I understand. Sort of. Yeah, I mean, definitely amend your pitch depending on the investor you're talking to. Yeah, absolutely. Most typically later stage funds are going to want to see traction. So if you're pre-revenue, pre-traction, then don't go to later stage funds, Series A type people. Go for the pre-seed, seed investors. If you're going for the earlier stage, don't go and raise. Don't go looking for £1 million at £10 million valuation, because you won't get it. Go looking for up to 500 at a more reasonable valuation, and then the whole process of raising the money will become a lot quicker on sort of reasonable terms, and then likewise going to later stage, go asking for larger amount, because typically the later stage VCs will have a minimum investment size that they'll need, so don't go pitching them for a lower amount. That will only turn them off. So yeah, definitely 100%. You want to be amending your deck and in your pitch depending on the stage of the investor, particularly the stage. Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. And related with that, Holger, which would you say are the most pressing challenges maybe legal tech entrepreneurs face when trying to scale their business and access even to financing?
Yeah. Well, if you let's look at two metrics, and they're from the Global Legal Tech Report. 80% of legal tech startups have a founder or one of the founders with a legal background. So that's good. If you look at the domain expertise you need for a legal tech startup, but it's horrible for everything else you need, like marketing, management, and so on, because that's not taught at law school. It's totally understandable. Lawyers don't have any clue about budgeting, finance, marketing, management, IT management, and so on. Luckily, most of the legal tech startups have some kind of co-founder from the software development industry, if they are lucky. So that helps. But that at some moment, if they get traction, if they have to grow, and if they have to grow quickly in their home market, and even more if they have to grow in different markets and maybe on different continents, because if you look at European legal tech startups, they branch out more quickly to other continents like Asia or the Northern and the Latin American markets. So then you're faced with a couple of issues. And if you look at the other metric, that most of 90% of legal tech startups worldwide, they have up to 3 founders. So ideally, it's 1 lawyer, 1 CTO, and 1 CMO, some kind of marketing maven. But at some point, that's not enough. You have to have talent, local talent. You have to have an understanding of the legal market in the country you're branching out to, the legal tech market, and so on. The specific issues, regulation. So that's an issue, but it's an issue for every startup. It's not specific to the legal tech domain. The only specific thing for the legal tech space is that most of the founders do have a legal background, not a management background. But well, that's why acceleration programs are there, and why they are important. They can give that assistance and find people for your startup and give you the basic understanding how to circumvent those obstacles.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for that too. And just to keep on time and sure we are running out of time. Would be great if we have any kind of questions from the audience in the last like 5 minutes we have. If there is anybody interested in placing a question, you can do it using the chat or the Q&A section. Please let us know. Open questions are open. And if no questions are there, Hilal?
Yeah, Andres, we have one question for Holger, and I want to ask directly. Holger, in your view, how does the European legal tech ecosystem compare to other ecosystems across the world, and which do you believe is the most developed? And what do you believe contributed to the success of the most developed ecosystem? Thank you.
Well, I think the European legal tech ecosystem is at least at number 2. Of course, if you look at the US market, it's the largest legal services market. So and they started quite early, around 40 years ago. But don't undervaluate the European market. We have our difficulties, so to say. It's not one space. It's 44 countries in Europe. But Europe has a very vibrant, very good ecosystem, legal tech ecosystem. A lot of interesting solutions. The problem is that there's not a lot of information available, and one of our tasks is to change that. Because if you look at like Germany, German lawyers usually don't know what's going on in Poland, France, Austria, Netherlands, Denmark, and so on, and vice versa. So that has to change, but that's quite easy to do. So I think the European legal tech market, or the ecosystem, is a very solid one.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we have one last question for Edward. He asks any tips for legal tech founders on how to develop a great pitch targeting angels or pre-seed funds, and in particular for investors who may not be familiar with the legal tech sector.
Yeah, I think I think when it comes to sort of cosmetics, I think on the deck, keep it relatively brief, just to be able to catch the attention of investors. They're going to go through hundreds of pitches a week, so you want to make sure it's all very clear. So that's the usual stuff, really: problem, solution, team, traction, ask, basically those sort of 5-6 high level slides, and then if you can make that stand out, then the investor will typically reach out and arrange a call with you or a meeting, at which point you would then go into a bit more detail around those specific things, including the market, etc. And they'll probably ask the questions they need to ask. But yeah, I think a tip: I wouldn't assume that. Yeah, I think it's always best to assume that the investor has no prior knowledge of the business or the deck when you do get that meeting. And so you want to run through the deck again with the investor, despite them having seen it previously. Just make sure you run through it again, explaining it all very clearly. And as part of that, you would then convey your understanding of the market and the problem and the solution. So yeah, that's how I would approach it.
Thank you very much, Edward. Yeah, these are the questions that we want to ask. To make the closing, I want to give the floor to you, Andres.
Yeah, apparently there are no more questions. We are just on time, so happy to have the session and share this conversation with you guys. Hopefully it helped in something, and you got some insights from the industry, from inside probably the industry, and yeah, and I believe in the acceleration program at the Founder Institute is going to be a great opportunity to share more experiences, and that's all about, right? The whole idea of taking part of these acceleration programs is to get information, to reduce the lack of information, and to train ourselves to be successful in your journey. So thanks a lot again to be here. Ed, Holger, thanks a lot for your thoughts and all your insightful contributions. Amit and Hilal, thanks again for all the coordination of the event, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.